BISMAN, the Center for Human Values, was founded 2 years back when we realized the importance of human values in today's world. A world that is torn by doubts, by prejudices, and by inequalities. When we use our values to make decisions, we make a deliberate choice to focus on what should be important to us. The word Bisman, it comes from Sukhmani Sahib, from the shalok that says, Bisman bisam be bismad, jin bujia din aya swad. Roughly translated, this would mean that when I look around and see the wonderful creation of God, I am wonderstruck and amazed. Comes to taste that unique state of bliss. So, Bisman is a state of awe when we gaze with wonder at God's creation. If one is able to realize this state of higher self, then all walls seem to fall. Then I am one at once with the mightiest of the king and also with the poorest of the poor, that beggar on the street. Today, if we see around us, what divides us is our prejudices that have enveloped us from the beginning. Since we have never seen beyond them or just seen the world through them, our vision automatically remains blurred. But what is worse is that most of the times we are not even aware that these prejudices exist within us. So we thought it appropriate that we focus on going beyond these prejudices and stereotypes. And it is here that this talk that we're going to have today fits in so well. I really don't know what Dr. Singh is really going to talk about, but the title is pretty engaging. Jokes and cinemas are two things that contribute actually to make up our consciousness and by extension, our personalities. And mind you, they are not as innocuous as they look. When I read a statement that says, I am the boss of this house and I have my wife's permission to say so, I'm supposed to laugh at it. Deconstructed, it is not as innocent as just a joke. Seeking a wife's permission is not the norm, and hence this is labeled as a joke. These jokes then shape up the way we choose to see the world. All of us have heard and laughed at the Sardar joke at least once in a lifetime. And those Santa Banta jokes are so hilarious. That is because we have typified a particular community, a particular class, and we've grown up to believe that Sikhs are people who give a damn. They believe in eat, drink, and be merry. And also, maybe, every Sardar should know how to do bhangra. Nowadays, I strongly protest whenever a Sardar joke is being told. And I'm told, yeah, come on, yeah, it is just a joke. Why are you taking things so seriously? So today, I hope we are going to see how much lies beneath just a joke or just a character in a movie. And before I invite Dr. Singh to take it from here, I would like to introduce her. Dr. Singh did her MPhil in English from Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, and her PhD in English from Mumbai University. She has taught in various institutions, including Mata Sundari College, University of Delhi, and is now a full-time writer. In 2014, the centenary year of Kumkata Mary incident, she was awarded the South Asian Diaspora Fund Senior Research Fellowship from Indo-Canadian Studies Centre, Mumbai. It involved research on the Sikh community and was aided by British Columbia Province, Canada. Her report on Sikh diaspora in British Columbia is being published in a forthcoming title by the Indian Diaspora Centre, University of Mumbai. Meanwhile, her first book on Sikh identity, titled The Sikh Next Door, An Identity in Transition, has been published by Bloomsbury Academia, India. It has received an excellent response from within and outside the community. Her interests center around contemporary literature, gender studies, ethnic identities, popular culture, post colonial perspectives, and the intersections. Her previous works include The Golden Arc, a collection of poems, and Male Image, Female Gaze, Men in Shashi Deshpande's fiction. We are really thankful to her for accepting our invitation and agreeing to talk to our students today. Over to you, Manpreet.
Thank you so much, Bhagwanji. I hope you can hear me.
We can.
Yeah. So thank you so much for inviting me here to talk today. Writing this book has changed the direction of what I have been doing so far. I was from the field of English literature, but after getting this fellowship, I ended up writing this book and suddenly have discovered that there is so much that we need to focus on in a more academic and concerted manner. And I hope I can, with this talk, create a new perspective, not only for those within the community, more so for those outside the community. So if you say, I will begin with the presentation.
Yes, please, please.
So, okay, can you see the presentation?
Yeah, we can. It's
Or
still a blank screen, but I hope we can. Have you begun with your PPT?
yes, I've begun with it.
No, we cannot. Can anyone else? Didi, can you?
No, not yet. It takes a moment.
Maybe.
Ma'am, have you played the slideshow?
Yeah, I'm not in the edit mode.
If you could just play the slideshow, we'll be able to see the slides.
Okay, just a minute. Yeah.
I thank all of you who have spared time today and been with us, especially my students. I thank you all. Thank you. Professor Janelle Singh is there, I can see. Thank you, sir, for accepting our request. Thank you.
How to start the slideshow?
Ma'am, we can see it now.
Yeah,
You
we
can?
can.
Okay, glad. I'm sorry for the little glitch. So
No,
we will
that's
carry on from here. I cannot see all of you, but okay, that doesn't really make a difference. So the topic for today is Stereotypes and Sensibilities, Exploring Representation of Sikhs in Jokes and Cinema. And as I have given a line from a poet here, one's sense of humor is a clue to the most serious part of one's nature. So a joke is not just a joke, it is a lot more than that. When I was invited here for the talk, on Sikhs, there were so many facets that I could have chosen to talk on, but I decided to broach this topic, which is considered too trivial for academic focus, because sometimes we need to revisit the trivial to find out what makes it so trivial. So today we are going to decode the Sikh joke and see what goes into making the joke. And hopefully we will also brush out from under the carpet the impetus behind this joke, the filters it creates for the community, and the possibility of moving out of the stereotypes these create. So I divide the talk into three parts, three verticals. First is going to be decoding the Sikh jokes through the lens of ethnic humor. Second is considering the impact of jokes and representations on the community. And the third is the possibility of moving outside these stereotypes. Before I begin with the talk, I would like to reiterate that despite some very rough patches which the community has undergone, Sikhs as a people have been quite well entrenched in the social spaces in the country. And there is a lot of cultural and social overlapping between the majority and the Sikh community. The Sikhs have had access to all the opportunities which have been provided to the others, which also means that they have undergone the same shifts which the rest of the people in the country have undergone. And if you ask others what they think of Sikhs, the general response is that there are people with grit and enterprise and a great readiness to help. That is what then makes us wonder why such a community is caricatured in jokes and in representations verging on the absurd. A Sikh is perpetually at the risk of slipping from his real identity into a caricatured one. It is as if a joke is lurking around the corner always, which is going to suddenly construct him as the other in a group which he considered his own. And he is perpetually and permanently expected to behave in a certain kind. You see a Sikh and you think that he is going into the balle balle mode. Why is this happening? This is an excerpt from my book which says, the Sikh next door or the ones you encounter in everyday, normal, routine, urban life are obviously different from images associated with them, as obvious as the fact that those images still color perceptions about them in stubborn ways. Because Sikhs are targeted through the jokes and the humor as a group, I am going to deconstruct the Sikh joke through the lens of ethnic humor. Why ethnic humor? Because ethnic humor provides the bulk of humor and jokes throughout the world, and therefore it has been under academic focus and provides us with the language and the terminology to explain this humor. When I refer to an ethnic people, I mean a people who have over time constructed a common heritage, a set of customs and practices, a history, and they are formed into a group which begins to be different from the normative. Now, as the group identity of such a group becomes stronger, they begin as a peripheral group, but as the identity becomes stronger, they begin to move towards the center, creating a sense of anxiety among the people who hold the center previously. And because their identity is different from the normative, it begins to be perceived as ambiguous. And this ambiguity creates anxiety in the minds of people. And it is here that humor comes in as a means of social control. What happens when such an ethnic group begins to be constructed in a joke? The underlying purpose of such humor is that by making fun of the ambiguity or the difference, those in power make it less threatening. And they also draw social boundaries through the process of othering. When you construct someone as the other, then you also establish boundaries between them and yourself. So in a way, humor becomes both a release of anxiety and a way of feeling in control. Every country has its own socio-historical contexts for this kind of ethnic humor, and we have our own. The point here to be taken up is, how did the Sikh come to be constructed as the other? Since its inception, there has been a great deal of social and cultural overlapping between the Sikhs and the others. Because remember that Sikhism drew people from the existing social surroundings and they brought in their social and cultural practices within Sikhism. So they were, so many customs, so many practices were similar to those among those outside Sikhism. If you look back and, if you ask your grandparents, the elders, they will tell you that they're not too long back, maybe 2 generations, 3 generations back, Many Hindu families in Punjab used to make their firstborn a Sikh. Many Sikh families married their daughters into Hindu homes. Then what happens suddenly to create the Sikh in the form of the other?
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Ma'am, could you please reshare your slides? Because and Arvinder Kaur, I'd request you to please stop sharing the screen. Sorry, Manpreet ma'am, please, could you please reshare your slides?
Okay. From the very beginning?
No, no, right,
No,
the slide, just reshare it. Just click on present now.
it is there, Nidhi. You got to.
It
Thank
is,
you.
it is still being shared.
Yes, yes.
Yeah? So should I carry on from where I left?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
Yeah. So to see how the Sikh got to be constructed as the other, we have to go back in time. And I think the colonial period is a good time to begin. During the colonial period, there was a great deal of anxiety because which started from conversions to Christianity, and that started many reform movements in the country. And these movements began as re-establishing cultural practices and kind of revamping the histories. But what happened in the process was also a rigidifying of religious identities. Now, we need to remember that by this time, the Sikhs already had a historical background. They had more than 200 years of history behind them. And this point became that moment where they started consolidating and crystallizing that identity into a separate one. The fact that this was also the time that political representation became the norm in British times. It was introduced, and the structuring of identity got related to politics. And to get political benefits, the Sikhs had to be constructed as a separate identity. Okay. It's okay. And this difference so what happened was that as the leaders on either sides built mutually exclusive stances, differences appeared where there had been none. While the Sikhs were constructing this individualized identity for a host of reasons, a complicated interplay of things, it was like, crystallizing and consolidating their history. The majority saw it as a belligerent tearing away from a common identity, and it also created certain hardening of feeling for what was seen to be a disregard for a life that had been shared. Partition aggravated matters because the Sikhs were dislocated from their homes in Western Punjab and had to come to Delhi and other North Indian cities. And this created a host of problems because the majority was still feeling the angst created by the differentiation of identity. And now suddenly there was this necessity to invite the Sikhs into the existing social and economic structures. Sikhs brought in a refugee culture, which also created more problems. They were a loud and aggressive people, and they were too busy surviving to be bothered with the niceties and the self-consciousness which is needed for a correct social posturing. And particularly in places like Delhi, which had a very genteel culture, they must have looked like misfits. There was also a lot of economic anxiety surrounding the Sikh community. They were the people who had lost their homes, their businesses, they had nothing to fall back upon. Now they were working with limited resources and utilizing them in a manner like which kind of breached the established economic orders. For example, there were people who were sitting on patris and selling things for much lesser than the same thing being sold in the shop in front of the patri. So this too caused anxieties in the minds of the majority. And even in course of time, when they began restructuring their lives, even that restructured life was very ostentatious. But we need to remember that, the community perhaps was reiterating not only to others, but also to themselves, that they had arrived again. However, they did it in a manner which was flashy, which was ostentatious, and there was this aggressive macho assertion and a hurry to entrench themselves in the economic and political spaces of the country. And this led to a lot of tension among the majority. It is here that the Sikh joke comes in, and how that operated to overcome this anxiety. I'm going to refer to a psychologist and a theorist and somebody working on humor to explain how the joke works. So Sigmund Freud says that when we try to make someone small, inferior, or comic, we are actually enjoying the feeling of overcoming him. And why this becomes more important in a joke is that when we are doing this process of overcoming him, there is someone else who is witnessing it. And by laughing along with us is reiterating the process of overcoming the other. Hobbes was a philosopher and a political theorist in the 17th century who also wrote on humor. And he said that when we laugh by denigrating someone else, we are actually validating ourselves. You know, it is a kind of a process of telling yourself that you are better than the other. Christy Davies has written many books on humor. So he says that the underlying impetus of the joke is to make the party targeted is constructed as the other. And the joke is on structuring their ways of doing things as silly and obtuse, and by comparison or by implication to assert that our way of doing things is the rational and the correct one. So when we will now go on to some of the examples of the Sikh jokes, and I will show you how they target work ethic, language, and social etiquettes. Because these are necessary for constructing the other party as small and trivial, and by implication suggesting that you are better. So here is a joke, the visual representation of a joke. And these are the kind of jokes which target the work ethic of the Sikhs. They imply that a Sikh depends more on his brawn than on his brain for working. And that, the implication is that he has not been entrenched into the system to receive the education, or doesn't have the background or the intellectual acumen to work within the modern economic and business spaces. And there are many jokes like this one. If you go and search for them, I'm sure you have heard so many of them. Then there are these jokes which target the language. There are two aspects to it. One is that whenever there is a Sikh character in a movie or in any media portrayal, you will find him speaking with this very silly, alien, and obdurate accent. What it implies is that he doesn't belong to this place. He is an outsider who has come here and brought with him his difference. And the second thing is the 101 jokes constructed around the wrong use of English by a Sikh. Now we have to remember that English in this country is still the biggest marker of elitism, of having arrived. It kind of shows so many things. It shows your background, it shows what kind of education you have had, and all of that. So by constantly focusing on the wrong use of English by the Sikh, what are we doing? We are constructing him as someone who has not arrived, who is on the other side of being somebody who matters. We also target the social etiquette because a few days back, there was a student, a college student, who said that while growing up, I had no form of self-representation other than Johnny Lever, half drunk and cracking 12 baj gaye jokes. Why is that? Because we are targeting the social etiquette of an entire community as if they're all a type. And to construct them in pictures in which they look like misfits in the mainstream creates a very wrong image around them. Let us now come to cinema. There is a great deal of othering in cinematic representations as well, which involves all these things: caricaturing the physical difference, trivializing cultural and historical traditions, disallowing context and development of character, constructing them as peripheral comic characters, denying focus on community shifts. So we will take these one by one. So let us first see representations. I am not going to mention the names of movies or the characters. It is for you to, we are dealing with the underlying impetus of what has been portrayed. So many of these representations caricature difference. A Sikh with a turban and a beard is different from someone who does not hold this identity. But this difference of identity, instead of being portrayed as a difference, is portrayed as a caricature. So when you see this picture, you see that in the first place, instead of a turban, he is wearing a patka, which kind of infantilizes him. And then he is dressed in colors and, a garish shades, and something which kind of reduces him to a carnivalesque curiosity, right? He's more of a spectacle than a person. Now, this image could be quite offensive to the community, because here there is someone who is wearing a turban but is definitely not looking like a Sikh otherwise. That is one part of the problem. The other is that Sikhs are always peripheral to the plot. I mean, they are dispensable. If you remove the Sikh, nothing is going to change in the plot of the story. He is there only as a filler or as comic relief. And the biggest problem is that he is not given a context. While the rest of the characters are contextualized in a culture, in a religion, in a particular social space, a Sikh just comes in and goes out. He's not entrenched into any background. And this is the reason why there is no possibility of evolving his character, of developing his character as a complete individual. He's just something, he's objectified. He's here and then he is not. And he is reduced to a type. Cinematic representations also trivialize traditions. Sikhs have been known for their martial identity, and they have been celebrated soldiers, not just in the recent past, but right from the time of their inception. But look at the caricaturing of that image. And the problem here is that a Sikh is considered for a serious portrayal, even in terms of his courage, only when he is depicted in service of the hero or the people or the nation. Otherwise, his courage and his martial identity is reduced to a mock heroic trope, and presenting that identity in such outlandish outfits and reducing it to a slapstick humor kind of trivializes that entire tradition. A Sikh is also constructed in static frames. So this is a few lines from the book. A Sikh must remain forever struck in his Bhangra regalia doing balle balle. While the world moves on, a Sikh is frozen into prescribed frames. I don't know how many of you have experienced it. I have experienced it many times, that when you are in a social gathering, just because you have a turban on your head, anyone who comes to meet you is going to begin with a balle balle. I mean, not everyone is in balle balle mode all the time. Again, a quote card from the book. Representations in cinema make it seem that a Sikh in every social sphere, every stratum, irrespective of individual difference in background, is essentially a type. He must act under a prescribed image. Now, what is the impact of these jokes and representations on the community? First of all, they create stereotypes. And as Joseph Boskin explains, what are stereotypes? Misleading tales that begin as a plausible account of a real people and then switch on to an absurd script based on a well-known established convention. By a repeated use of jokes and representations in cinema, you have reduced the man to a type, and this creates filters for those who are observing him. They expect him to behave in a certain manner. And even if he's not like that, it is for you, it is difficult to separate the image and the man. So what has happened because of these stereotypes? This is again from the book. Vacillating between images of men in Bhangra regalia, dancing in mustard fields, and the obtuse Santa Banta stereotype, between the dichotomous images of valorous soldiers and hated terrorists, the blingy Sardar of Bollywood movies, and the exotic Nihang, the average Sikh finds it hard to explain himself. The Sikhs do not find any representation of themselves which gels with who they really are. And the funny part is that this stereotype persists. In the last few decades, the Sikh profile has changed a lot because of urbanization, because of so many people, shifting occupations, shifting from the rural to the urban, becoming part of diasporas. But the point is, the stereotype does not change. And Boskin and Doranson in their book say, a section of society prescribing to iron-bound stereotypes keeps returning to them. The stereotypes thus keep becoming more persistent even as the people they caricature move beyond and outside. Why is it so? Why is it so hard to relinquish a stereotype which is no longer relevant? Perhaps because this stereotype holds within itself power paradigms. It structures the teller of the joke as big and the target as small. So the binaries of the powerful and the powerless, of the big and the small, implicit in these stereotypes are what do not allow its relinquishing. Now, here are some images, and you tell me which of these is like the Sikhs that you know. Living in North Indian cities, you are constantly with Sikhs, you have Sikh friends, you know people in your workspaces. How many of you have seen them in such modes? But the point...
Neither. No.
Neither of them.
Yeah, neither of them. And so, but the point is, these are stereotypes which stick. And even Amul, when had to present a Sikh picture, went for a stereotype. So what do these stereotypes do? They prevent a nuanced understanding of the community, and they disallow cognition of the community's contemporary profile. The problem is that there are no structured means of knowledge about the community. All that you are getting to know of the community is from these representations, maybe these jokes which create filters in your mind. Where else would you get to know of the community? And so these stereotypes persist, and there is no cognition of the contemporary Sikh profile. It is not just stereotyping and not understanding the shifts in the community. Humor can be very cruel also. There are so many Sikh children who will tell you of how they have been bullied in school because they have long hair and they wear a patka, And anytime a joke or a caricature can be used to other them in class. And it is the same with young adults, college-going students, and it constantly causes embarrassment and discomfiture for them. Now, what is the response from the community to these jokes and caricatures? People who crack jokes in a company which has Sikhs amongst them will quickly reiterate that Sikhs are people with a big heart and they don't mind a joke being cracked on them. Is that really true? The truth is that humor is a very powerful communicative system. While it draws people in, it also shuts people out. Those who laugh belong, those who don't laugh are excluded. And as a mere 2% population, it is not possible for Sikhs to be shut out of social and economic spaces. Hence, many times they take the joke. They laugh along with others when the joke is being cracked. But one needs to remember that allowing them into groups at the condition that they participate in berating their own identity is not something they're happy about. They are very uncomfortable and they are angry. But there are times when they can do nothing about it. But anger spills over sometimes. And there are people who have asked for legal recourses to banning the Sikh joke, which I don't think, a legal recourse cannot do much about something which is social in content and context. So where do we look for a resolution to? The response has to come not just from within the community, but from outside the community. And it is very gratifying to note that there is a shift in perspective, particularly from the current generation, because I think first, they are not carrying the baggage of the past. Second, they have been exposed to systems of education which make them respect difference. And they also know that what is existing is not always the right thing. And therefore, they are able to resist in-group pressures. And this is becoming visible in so many ways. For example, I will first refer to something that is happening in popular culture and is very interesting. So there are a host of Sikh boys who are doing these shows, right? And they are cracking Sikh jokes. But in the process of cracking the Sikh joke, they are actually subverting the joke. They are turning it upside down. And at the end of it, people are laughing not at the joke, but at the absurdity of the joke. And the fact that there is a whole lot of non-Sikhs in the audience who are understanding this absurdity and laughing at it goes to show the change that is occurring in the social spaces, particularly where younger people are involved. Cinematic representations are changing too. There is a long way to go, but the process has already begun. So we are going to look at some of the movies which are creating a greater awareness of the community instead of only caricaturing them. Rang De Basanti is one movie in which the central character is not only contextualized within his national identity, but also his social and cultural identity, and seamlessly so. There is no division in the two. And that is true of so many of the Sikhs in India. Why so many? Most of the Sikhs in India. Then this is Bhag Milkha Bhag. It is about the trauma which an entire generation experienced in the course of partition. So this movie is rooting the Sikh character in his history and thereby explaining many of his current stances, which is so very important. There are these two movies, Marches and Amu. Marches is about what transpired in the 80s in Punjab and how an entire younger generation was, got involved in it, not because of their own volition, but because of the circumstances surrounding them. Amu talks of 1984 and the impact of what happened in 1984 in Delhi on a generation, uh, children who were very small, and what happened to them afterwards. There is this beautiful movie called Chauthi Koot, which is again about representation of Sikhs in the 80s in Punjab, and it explores positive resolutions to the problems which in those times elicited not very positive resolutions. Then there is this movie called Kissa, which questions patriarchy in Sikh families and thereby kind of, makes a more nuanced questioning instead of merely caricaturing it. This is a movie which is not showing the Sikhs in a very great light, but these questions are relevant. So this kind of cinema is also required and relevant. This brings to my mind a movie which is not from India, but because it shows what ethics of cinematic representation should be. So I thought I will bring in a slide on that also. This is Ben Kingsley. And in this movie called Learning to Drive, he played Darwan Singh, who is a university professor in Punjab, who has shifted to taxi driving in Manhattan. And the beautiful contextualization in the political situation, in the social and economic situations, make him a complete character. He's evolved beautifully into a real person, not a caricature. And in the making of the movie, Ben Kingsley gave an interview in which he said that while he was working on this movie, the primary concern in his mind was to make an honest representation of a Sikh. And he said it was more of a joy than of a responsibility doing that. Literature also breaks stereotypes, and I think one of the most important ways to put it across to people outside the community is to write about the community. So here are a few examples. What the Body Remembers by Shauna Singh Baldwin, I think, is one of the most beautiful works written on Sikh identity. It deals with Sikh privilege in pre-partitioned Punjab and how that privilege and the identity got diluted when those people had to shift from West Pakistan to North Indian cities. Can You Hear the Night Bird Called is a novel by Anita Rao Badami. She is not a Sikh, she's a non-Sikh writer, but has made a beautiful and a nuanced representation of Sikhs. Again, the situation is the 80s, and she talks about how people in the diaspora got caught into this entire radicalization and all that it led to. These are two books which are very significant, very important for chronicling the present. Helium by Jaspreet Singh deals with 1984, and the book is presented through the eyes of a non-Sikh narrator, and beautifully, it shows that what happened in 84 and the lack of acknowledgement about it hangs like a drop of helium which keeps on gathering mass on the underside of the national consciousness. Then there is Sanjeev Sahota's book, The Year of the Runaways, which deals with illegal immigrants from the community, and it also explores the caste and the persisting caste structures within the Sikh society. So these are books which tell you so much more about the community, which is very important for placing them as a people. Since this is a talk which was initiated by an academic institution. I have a few suggestions for the academicians here. I would suggest that in order to move out of the stereotypes created by the jokes and the representations in cinema, we need to initiate more research on Sikh social identity. The existing work, most of the existing work and research areas on Sikhs deal either with the theological side of Sikh identity or with the political side. We need to pay more emphasis to the Sikh social identity. I also feel that even though there is a very small body of literature on Sikhs in English, we need to make an attempt to bring that into the course structures. We need to teach it as part of post-colonial courses in universities. We teach Neruda and we teach Walcott, and we consider the post-colonial responses of people in the Caribbean and the Africa. Why are we not doing it for our own people? We also need to encourage translation of Punjabi works to understand the community perspectives, because unless the books are written in a language which can be read by those outside the community, it's not going to make a difference. So we need to have more translations, we need to have more work, and we need to have more translations. To the younger lot here, I will say, speak out and share your experiences. There is a receptive and decent response awaiting you. Many around you and many among you are people with sensitivity and a more nuanced response. And sharing your experiences might bring the angst out into the open and help in removing it. So that's it. Thank you so much. I hope I have been able to put across some relevant points to the people here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. It was really an afternoon well spent, and you really, kind of deconstructed the things in front of us. And I remember, as a child, sometimes I used to wonder when my brother used to come back home, he would be in such a bad mood. My father happened to be in the army, and we would be posted in far-flung areas like Shillong and Goa, and there people had not seen a Sikh, or at least not interacted closely with them. For them, that juda on the head was something they would pull sometimes to see isme kya rakha hai, ball rakha, and that is really so traumatic. And he would come home and not talk, and we would wonder. I, being a girl, was not subjected to that kind of a thing, but he, with his, because appearance-wise, he was so different.
Yes.
And even I, sometimes I'd come home and ask my mother, why can't I cut my hair? No, and of course, at home, my mother would explain to me lovingly that, no, we don't do that. I said, this takes such a lot of time. And I would see my friends, with their cut hair, and I would find them very fashionable. But yes, this does affect the psychology, especially, when it is younger children involved. As we grow up, I think maybe we can defend ourselves. But when you're young, you don't even have a voice. You don't know, because then you lose all your friends if you start fighting with every one of them.
Yes.
Yes, Gurpal, one of our students from BISMAN.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you are there. Yeah. Please, can you put up some questions or maybe some comments? I can see a number of them in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. There is one question by Rasleen. She asked that how do we explain the idea of a kirpan to non-Sikhs?
See, this is this is part of a different, it's part of our religious identity, which I am not addressing today. But still, to create any kind of understanding, we have to create more knowledge around the identity. And we have to involve people from the outside. Instead of, as you said, defending is only one aspect. I think we need to create awareness so that the need for defending does not arise. So it is always a matter of creating more understanding, a more nuanced understanding.
Okay, ma'am. We have a comment by Tavleen.
Gurpal, Professor Janelle Singh wants to ask a question. I think he can ask it himself. Yes,
Okay,
Professor,
ma'am.
you can ask it yourself. You can unmute yourself, please.
Hello,
Hello.
am I audible, Manpreet?
Yes, you are.
So I have listened to your oration. It is full of, a lot of enlightenment on the issue. I congratulate you, first of all. And it was very engaging talk. The way you put it across, very good. And the theme is also wonderful. The how you have put forward people. These actually you have articulated in a very perfect manner a something which was in the air. People, everybody felt it. So credit goes to you for this.
Thank you so much.
And what I want to say or ask in this connection is there is a very common line, तुम जो इतना मुस्कुरा रहे हो क्या गम है जिसको छुपा रहे हो. I feel behind these jokes there is terrible tragedies which are lying hidden below the surface. And to forget them, we try to laugh them away. And but a very sad aspect of this thing is what we see these days in Punjabi films. How we look at a Punjabi film, and what character of Punjab comes up from these films. They
That
are
is
doing injustice to it. We are not so non-serious people. They are just going, joking, talking, laughing, and all the time doing all these things. So I wanted to draw the attention of this audience also that in Punjabi films, the Punjabi hero is shown as somebody person who is fighting bullets, cars, trucks, everything non-serious. So I think people try to construct jokes because we are not serious about our persona or
That
personality.
is true. That is true. These videos and these are creating new stereotypes and very undesirable ones. And I address this aspect in my book. Uh,
That's
if you happen to read it, it is explored in detail as to why this happens and what it is leading to.
and your analysis about the other and anxiety. These things are very exploratory, and they have their own effect in understanding the psychology of other people who are just trying to denigrate the class. Actually, Punjabis have fought at the border with so many people coming to the country. And they have a Mako image also, macho image, you can say. And people definitely try to, I agree with you, that they try to belittle them by constructing jokes. It's very nice, line of thought. So, being very brief, I will first of all, once again, I will congratulate you, and I will definitely look for your book.
Thank you so much. But there is one thing that I would like to say in response to what you have said just now. I have a feeling that many times when a non-Sikh cracks a joke against a Sikh, perhaps they are not even understanding the implications of what they are doing.
Yeah.
So, what I tried to do today was to deconstruct it and to show the impetus that has gone into constructing this joke. I mean, perhaps, what happens is that many times the feedback that you get from your own background is something you mimic, and that becomes part of your social behavior. But perhaps if you understand the nuances of what you are doing, you might not do it. And that is my purpose here. It is not to create a rift between the one who's cracking the joke and the one on whom the joke is being cracked. It is to bridge the gap. It is to make, to create this understanding that at least know what you're doing and why you're doing it.
And you have succeeded.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Wonderful. All the best. Please continue.
Thank you so much.
Maybe we have time just for one last question, please.
Yes, ma'am. We have one question. Akshita Mishra asks, how does one navigate the space which intersects between religion and the practice of it without compromising on one's wishes and desire? She has also given the context of it. She says hair removal from various parts of the body, even though it could be dissolved as per religious text.
See, you've asked a question which does not fall into the realm of what we are speaking of today, right? I navigating between religion and what you wish to do. First of all, you have to see, like, if you belong to an identity, then you kind of abide by its rules also, right? And the other thing is that perhaps, in course of time, do we need a little more flexibility in the way we approach religion, and how do we deal with the younger? This is a very sensitive topic, and I don't know, whether I should be discussing it here or not. But what do you think we need to do about children who do cut their hair? And there are so many of them these days. What do we need to do about them? Do we say that you're not part of the community anymore? Do we need to be more flexible about it? Do we need to draw them back into the fold? I think we need to be flexible enough to at least afford time to them for coming back, of understanding that this is the identity that we've opted for, and in coming back to it willingly. Till then, at least we need to perhaps have more patience and flexibility for them.
Thank you so much. And I think if we start off with a discussion, this can go on for a longer time. Maybe we can have you back again once more, Manpreet. Would love to have you back. In the meantime, I'm ordering your books for the library as well, because this is such a relevant topic that and it do good to sensitize people to us. Once our youth is sensitized, I think we can look in for a better tomorrow. Now, may I request Ms. Didi Verma to please give us the vote of thanks? Didi Verma.
Thank you so much, Bhagwant ma'am. On behalf of BISMAN, the Center for Human Values, Sri Guru Nanak Dev Khalsa College, I would like to propose the vote of thanks for today's program. I would like to begin by thanking Dr. Manpreet J. Singh for her wonderful talk today, which provided such great insight into the psyche behind the formation of the stereotype of the Sikh, especially as seen in jokes and popular cinema. I'm sure the students have gained hugely from their interaction with you. We appreciate your taking the time out from your current and we know very busy schedule to be with us. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We thank all the participants for attending today's session. I'm sure it was time well spent. Next, we thank our principal, Dr. Gurmohinder Singh, for his constant support and enthusiasm for the programs we organize. The BISMAN student volunteers deserve special mention for working to make this event a special success, especially Gurpal and Charu. And thank you, Ishika Kampoj, for your patience in making the poster. My colleague Sukhvinder Kaur for her able management of all technicalities involved in the event. And last but not the least, gratitude and appreciation for the enthusiasm and drive that characterizes our convener, Dr. Bhagwant Kaur. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Everyone to please fill up the feedback form before leaving. Please do that. The attendance and the feedback form has been given in the link in the chat box. We're going to be there. You can leave as soon as you fill that up. And Dr. Singh, please, you too. And Professor Junaid Singh Abdi, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please be sure to fill out the feedback forms. Thank you.
And keep leaving off once you have done that so we know that it is done. Thank you.